Yeah.
What are the differences in outcomes for kids growing up in a single parent versus a two-parent household?
So we can start by seeing that in the immediate term. Let me emphasize some like basic things. If a kid only lives in a household with, a one parent or an unmarried mother, which is mostly the case, there's their chance of living in poverty are 5 times higher. Part of that reflects the fact that, moms from low income backgrounds are more likely to become single moms. But even if you just look across moms of the same level of education, same background characteristics, it's not surprising that kids from married parent households live in households with more income. Okay. Income is a big part of the reason why these kids do better. Why? Because their parents can spend more on housing in better neighborhoods. They get access to better schools. We see that, these parents spend more on their kids and enriching activities and educational activities. They basically have more opportunities. You can see this in the most, simple way. Like it's really expensive to pay for club sports or music lessons. So kids from married parent homes have different opportunities. It translates into better outcomes. They are less likely to get in trouble in school. And let's come back to that finding because that's a really interesting one. They're less likely to get in trouble in school. For boys in particular, they're less likely to get suspended. Part of this comes from the fact that, here I'm drawing on development psychology. When boys are sort of suffering internally, they're more likely to act out in what psychologists refer to as externalizing behavior. Girls are more likely to internalize it. So I don't want to say that girls are necessarily not struggling as much, but boys are more likely to act out, which means they're more likely to get in trouble in school and they're more likely to get suspended. And that cascades. Then we also see that they're more likely to be involved with the criminal justice system. So it's just, again, getting back to like the idea of, let's stop pretending like two parents are beneficial. There's no way to look at the data and the studies and not feel like, oh, wow, kids from two-parent homes are much less likely to get in trouble in school. They're much less likely to get suspended. They're much more likely to be engaged in crime. They're more likely to graduate high school. They're more likely to graduate college. They're more likely to have higher earnings as an adult. They're more likely to be married as an adult, less likely to be a single parent themselves. This is, again, why this is so crucial for us to address, because we are, by allowing this class divide in family structure to continue, it's accentuating inequality. It's undermining social mobility, because there are both short and immediate term effects in childhood. They have lasting effects on sort of someone's lifetime trajectory, and then these compound across the generations.
Have you been able to analyze whether the children of single-parent households are more likely to become the parents of single-parent households?
That is something that lots of people have documented. That's well established.
So you almost have this kind of recursive feedback loop that makes it ever more common.
100%. And also, to get back to the conversation we were having about like what's up with men, that so many of them either don't view themselves as somebody who should commit to a family, or the women don't view them as somebody who's worth committing to as a family. We actually, there's a lot of really well done studies from the past 10 years showing that boys are particularly disadvantaged by the absence of a dad from their home. Okay. Some careful work done by the economists Marion Bertrand and Jessica Pond tries to get at why that is, like what's driving that in the household. The interesting thing that their research uncovers, and again, this is using really large scale nationally representative data sets, is that boys get less investment, parental input, nurturing parenting. They're more likely to, have their mom spank them or be harsh to them. And again, that's not me judging single moms. It's really tiring to parent. It's really hard to maintain your temper when a kid is misbehaving.
Especially if it's a boisterous boy.
Especially if it's a boisterous boy and you don't have someone else to be like, could you take over? I need a break, right? So they see in the data, in these data sets that record, like, do you spank your kid? How connected do you feel with your kid? How much time do you spend with your kid? You see that boys from single mother homes get less of that. But what's really interesting is that boys are particularly responsive to that. So let's say the differences in the parental inputs or investments are small. How they respond to that is large, right? another way to think about this is I have a daughter and a son. If I, sort of ignore my daughter or whatever, she's probably not going to go to school and get in trouble. If I am like harsh with my son, if I don't put in as much time into him, if he's really struggling, he's more likely to go to school and get in trouble, right? Like that's sort of what he's missing in parenting is more likely to lead him to act out in a way that gets him suspended and then all the snowball effects. So boys are particularly disadvantaged by not having a dad in the home and, how that affects them. There's another study that came out of the Opportunity Insights Lab at Harvard. This is the lab run by Raj Chetty and colleagues that has access to millions of tax records. So they know exactly where kids grew up, and then they follow them into adulthood. The single biggest predictor of whether a Black boy sort of climbs the economic ladder into adulthood at a neighborhood level. So what neighborhood characteristics are most predictive of economically good outcomes for Black boys?
Can I guess?
Go ahead.
The proportion of single fathers.
The presence of Black dads in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So beyond just having a dad in your house, if there's a bunch of, if the households around you, Black households around you also have dads, single biggest predictor of whether you do well economically in adulthood. And so there again, who's being helped by us denying that Black boys in particular, as if like all of the discrimination we know they face, all of these other barriers, like those boys are being harmed by not having dads around. And so this gets back to the intergenerational nature of this. The more boys we have growing up without dads in their house, the less likely they are to sort of thrive and be their best selves when they grow up, which means the less capable they're going to be supportive, reliable, married dads. And again, this is just like, we've got to break this cycle.
Yeah, it's this Ouroboros of like ineligibility and irresponsibility. And that then creates another generation, that creates another generation, that creates another generation. So have you read Anna Machin's The Life of Dad?
No.
This is something that you should absolutely read. So she's an evolutionary anthropologist. She came out of Robin Dunbar's lab at Oxford. And I just had her on the show. I'll send you the episode. You can listen to
great.
it. And she talks about the importance of fatherhood. From a developmental perspective, and she looks at it through an anthropological lens. She looks at evolutionarily, does some evolutionary psychology. One of the really interesting things that she folded in, and you're right, rough and tumble play, especially for boys, especially in early childhood, is very important because it teaches them the role of fathers is largely to both play but to set rules. That you can climb that tree, but you can't. Don't go higher than that. As opposed to mum would have not let them go up the tree at all. And this understanding, allowing of risk-taking behavior a little bit more is good. Now, the really interesting thing I learned from her that I think you would love to fold into some of your work is what happens to adolescent girls without a father.
Yeah.
Now, when you get into teenage years, it is absolutely crucial that a adolescent girl has father around. When the boys are there a little bit more, it seems like they're acting out behavior. It's more crucial for the boys earlier on, but for the girls, it seems to be during that later period. And you get like all sorts of weird sociosexual nudges here and there. You get all sorts of strange behaviors. I know like daddy issues is kind of a meme, but it almost seems to have arisen in the data.
This is like a really sappy thing for me to say. And I, again, like, to be clear, all of the conclusions I draw in the book are from very rigorous analytic work with data. But this was really sort of salient and top of mind recently because, of course, I think about all this and I'm thinking all the time about the class gaps in this and how can we not be honest about this? And I was at a graduation dinner. My son just graduated high school. And so there were a bunch of families there. And almost every dad that got up to toast his boy also toasted his wife. Everyone in this room was married, okay? And would say things like, and these boys are great boys because they have strong moms. And I was like, what an example this sets to both our teenage boys and our girls. right? This is what you should expect. When you grow up, you like celebrate your wife and you treat her well. And girls, this is what you should expect, right? And so again, it's just sappy, but I was like, this is such a perfect microcosm of this privileged class of kids getting exposed to this positive example, which is just not nearly as widespread or prevalent. And also, by the way, when you read the interviews with like these unmarried couples who go to some of these, not well-funded programs in the communities that work for strengthening families. And so, social scientists, and I used to be one of them, sort of poo-pooed the Bush initiatives, that like healthy marriage initiatives, because you're like, it doesn't even increase marriage. But then when you read the interviews with the folks, they keep showing up to these relationship classes and they say things like, I didn't come from a two-parent family. I don't really know that many married people. They don't have an example of how to make it work, right? So it's again, these anecdotes all sort of confirm what we see as trends in the data.
Every single morning for over 3 years now, I've started my day the exact same way, which is with Element in water. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio of sodium, potassium, and magnesium, and it is the best hydration drink that I've ever found. It tastes fantastic, it's super refreshing. Orange is just the most OP flavor in the world. It's absolutely phenomenal, and it helps to play a critical role in reducing muscle cramps and fatigue. It regulates your appetite, it optimizes brain health, and it helps curb cravings. They're also the exclusive hydration partner to Team USA weightlifting and relied on by tons of Olympic athletes and everyday high performers all around the world. Also, there is a no BS, no questions asked refund policy where you can buy a box completely risk-free, and if you do not like it for any reason, they will give you a refund during an unlimited duration, and you don't even need to return the box. That's how confident they are that you'll love it. Element are giving away a free sample pack of all 8 flavors with your first box if you go to the link in the description box below, or drinklmnt.com/MW. That's drinklmnt.com/MW. What's happening, people? If you enjoyed that, then press here for the full, unedited episode. And don't forget to subscribe.